And welcome back. We have here with us the members of the Bahai community of Belize. And we have Ms. Laurel Garbutt, who is a member, also Bernard Codd, and Richard Beane, who is the national coordinator. So welcome.
Thank you.
And today is a special day for you guys, right?
Well, it's not necessarily today in and of itself, but we've had, as you know, a recent event this particular month that was important. So, yeah.
We meant it special because you're here to tell us.
That's what we Of course. That's always a special day, right?
Yeah, we recently celebrated the bicentennial of the birth of Baha'u'llah, and so we had a national celebration in Belmopan where we invited Baha'is from all over the country and also friends, family, person interested. And so we had a diverse program. We had artistic presentation, a little bit of history of the faith, and it was a nice experience to have, you know, Baha'is from all over come together and people who maybe are curious, not so curious, get to learn a little bit more of the faith. Bernard actually was one of the main coordinators of the program, the event, so maybe he could share a little bit as to how that came about, the planning process.
The planning started way in advance, and we tried to include all the different communities, everybody coming together. One of the main teachings of the Baha'i faith is unity in diversity. No matter our background, where we come from, it's all about us coming together. And so the event was very beautiful, and a lot of work went into all aspects of it. You know, people came in and said, you know, they're willing to do this. Another group came in and did something else. So we were really happy with the turnout, and we had maybe a little bit less than 300 people for that event.
Wow.
And I think the program was really, really good.
And all of them were members of the Baha'i community?
I believe the majority were Baha'is, but a lot of friends of the Baha'i faith, because there are people that may not come out and say they are Baha'is, but they believe in the Baha'i principles, they believe in the Baha'i teachings. Yeah. Beautiful teachings, of course.
And what are those teachings, those principles?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's lots of them, and the hard thing is, you know, to encapsulate a whole religion into.
Yeah.
But I think one of the main things, obviously, there is one God. That this one God has created all of humanity, so to a certain degree, we're all one family. And then beyond that, it's important to understand that there's kind of a progressive revelation that God has slowly but surely revealed himself to humanity over time, and primarily done this by sending different messengers. So he sent Moses, he sent Christ, and as Baha'is we believe he sent Baha'u'llah in this day to help unite all of humanity together.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes from the writings is, "The earth is but one country and mankind its citizens." So the idea is that we all are one big family and really need to work together to achieve the goals to make all of humanity live better lives.
And you know, we're living in a time where I feel like there's a lot more disunity than unity. So how do you go about, since it's an overarching principle, achieving that or trying to achieve unity? Right here in Belize.
Right.
You know, last night, you know, when you're preparing for the show and thinking about it, one of the key things that kept coming into my mind is that, like in the Baha'i faith, we chose to focus on what we have in common. Because one of the teachings of the faith tells us that when you focus on otherness, it's easier to have disunity. But when you focus on all the things we have in common, like Richard said, you know, if you look at our Baha'i community countrywide, we have people from all ethnic groups, racial classes, ages, and men, women. And the idea is not to promote men, women culture, but to embrace all of our culture and also to focus on, like I said, all the things we have in common and to keep close to the writings of Baha'u'llah, because he has told us that, you know, we are one human family. So if we can keep out maybe our personal biases and focus on that, on his teaching, that is how we can remain united. And of course, Baha'is are human beings and we have imperfections.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the main idea is that when you think of all the negative things, like Baha'u'llah has taught us, when a thought of war comes, oppose it with a stronger thought of peace. And that is the main idea, just to focus on those words and to focus on those writings, and so we get through all of the indifferences that humanity have.
And just to add to that a little bit, the idea is that I think it's absolutely right. The principles are very important in the thing, the equality of men and women, the elimination of prejudice and that type of thing. but especially lately, one of the major focuses is to have certain types of activities in communities that really help people commit to individual and collective transformation. So both at the neighborhood level and at the larger societal level, we can actually implement some of these principles. So that's done through, children's classes, junior youth groups, devotionals, and also opportunities to get together and study the Word of God itself. So the idea is to have the principles there, but also start implementing them in a systematic way so those principles can actually become part of the lives of us as individuals, but also as a community as well.
Let me give a basic example. I grew up in a small family, and as we grew older, we found out that there was an extra sibling here or an extra sibling there. And when you find out that you have a bigger family, your doors open and said, okay, cuz come over, have lunch, or come and spend the night, or let me go over to visit you. And so as society progresses, our hope is that society learns that they're all part of a bigger family. And when you see that person that was a stranger for maybe 20 years, 30 years, and that person, you realize that the person is your family, the whole dynamics of how things operate changes.
Yeah. Now, how long has the Baha'i faith been established in Belize? Members of the Baha'i faith been established in Belize?
About 50 years?
years,
Yeah, about
yeah.
50 years now.
50.
50
years.
50.
5
Yeah,
zero.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are at about 300 or less, you said, members countrywide. How do you establish a presence in a country that is predominantly Christians? And Belizeans we are a particularly unique country because we are very much proud of our religious communities. So how do you establish your presence and be able to integrate within the wider communities as well?
Well, the Baha'i faith, like you said, initially we had people from outside of the country first come, and it's kind of, to say, okay, we're Baha'is, this is what the faith is about. And based on that, that is how the community initially started.
Yeah.
From there, of course, there were a lot of visiting of neighborhoods, of villages, of districts. And it hasn't been like overnight.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I became a Baha'i as a teenager. I'm now in my 30s.
You've been in it for a while.
For a while. So it has grown. There are like people who grew in Baha'i families, like Bernard, for example. His parents were Baha'is, and so he kind of grew up in that family. Myself, I am the only Baha'i in my family. In that, as a teenager, I kind of investigated based on having met someone who was from a Baha'i family. That's kind of how the faith spreads.
Yeah.
Our community building activities, like Richard mentioned, aside from our religious celebrations and observances, we do have activities for children, for youths, for adults. And our activities are not geared to convert anybody, but basically to teach the principles of our faith, and to say, like for the children, for example, we focus a lot on the virtues. For the junior youth, we focus on how they can make a difference to the community, about service. And so that's slowly kind of how we
Brought
teach
other
faith.
people in.
Exactly.
So it isn't an active evangelization process.
It's not to say that, we're turning people away, but yes, you're absolutely
some
right.
religions have that as a part of
Right.
their mandate, in other words, to go out and get others to join your faith.
So the primary idea is we want to transform all of humanity and bring all of people into this community building process where the qualities that we've talked about, such as the equality of men and women, the equality of the races, all these other things are part of that. And I think we talked about earlier before we started this whole idea of some of the things that are happening in Belmopan with the junior youth groups there. I'd say 90+% of the people in the junior youth group, of about 24 people, aren't Baha'is. They're kids from all kinds of different backgrounds, but they're all working together to do service and other things in the community. And not only does that involve people who aren't Baha'is, but when you start doing service for the hospital and service for other people, that gets them involved as well. So the idea is really primarily to focus on the spread of certain beliefs and attitudes that will lead to the advancement of humanity. And of course, that eventually, I think, will also lend itself to the growth of the faith as well.
Let me come back to Laurel for a minute, because I think it's fascinating. I always find it fascinating when any person chooses their religious faith, because quite often it happens that you're born into a family and that's just, it is what it is. Whether you choose to adhere or follow through is a different story. Now, what was it about this particular faith that called you? And especially in your teenage years, where we tend to be skeptical about everything, yeah?
Well, like I mentioned, I met a friend of mine in high school in first term actually, and we became friends, and through her friendship, I visited her family, and her family were Baha'is, and I used to attend devotions, study meetings at her house just because I was her friend.
What religion, did you have another religion before?
I grew up basically not with strong religious background. It was a Christian family, but not to say, okay, I'm Anglican.
Church-going
Church,
kinda.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so what struck me about the Baha'i faith is that I like to say I'm an independent-minded person, and one thing I like about Baha'i faith is a principle of independent investigation of truth. Like, for example, I visit those activities, I learned information, and at the age of 15, which is actually the age that the Baha'i faith tells us that a person is of the mental maturity to make a choice, I decided that this sounds good, I want to learn more. Didn't say that at 15 I learned everything, but through the course of my life, I have remained a Baha'i and remained active in the faith because of the principles of it, like the oneness of humanity, equality of men and women, which as a Belizean woman is very important to me. To, like when you attend Baha'i activities, for example, or Baha'i institutions, there are well representation of women and men working together, and that's one of the things that I like. I like the focus on family values. You know, in the Baha'i faith, it's not about just the husband, just the wife. It's working together as a team, the children, the community. And one of the things I always say is that as a Baha'i, I'm not just my Baha'i family in Belize, it's a worldwide Baha'i community. We've had Baha'is who have come from all over the world to give service here, to teach. Not to say that, like you said, okay, don't we proclamate or whatever. We do teach. That's a duty of every Baha'i to talk about the faith. Yeah. But it's not we try not to be in your face. But that's one of the things that attracted me, just the idea of I can think for myself and make an informed decision, and the unity and being a part of a global family.
And what has the reception been from the kids that you work with? Because I know that that's mainly what you do in Belmopan, you know. And what has the reception been from them? Are they receptive to maybe one day becoming members of the Baha'i community, or?
You know, it's kind of, I think there's two different levels of that. First, you also have the parents and the family, right? Yeah. I think one of the things in the beginning, people were a little uncertain, right? We talked about, they went to Evergreen, they talked to the principal, you know, how's this all going to work out? But I think what people have found overall, and in fact, some of the kids' parents have asked them, are they trying to convert? And it's been clear that it's just about service and learning how to be a good, you know, youth and that type of thing. So the reception overall has been very good. The kids come over to the house all the time. They love spending time together. They love doing service together and all those other type of things. So I think it really provides them a safe environment to really enjoy themselves and to learn about the way that they can kind of improve their lives. And I think overall, the idea is that every year now, there's an expectation that there's going to be another youth group started. And the kids are saying, well, when's my youth group going to start? So, because there's been so much good press and so many good things said about it, both in terms of within the group itself, but also in the larger community as well. So it's worked out pretty well.
And for someone who knows very little about the faith, what would you tell them as, you know, very briefly, what's the history of the faith?
Okay.
Very briefly, if that's possible.
Okay. The faith is an independent world religion, just like Judaism or Christianity, along those lines. The faith was founded by someone named Baha'u'llah, which is a name that may sound a little strange, but really just what it means is glory of God. And he came in the mid-1800s and said that several things that we've already talked about. There is one God, that he's created all of humanity, and that he has a purpose for humanity. And the whole idea is that the primary way that he's implemented this purpose is to educate humanity over time. So he sent messengers like Moses, His Holiness Jesus Christ, and we believe in this day that he sent Baha'u'llah to come with a message that would allow all of humanity to unite and be one family. And the reason why it's possible in this day and maybe not in previous days is humanity wasn't mature enough at that time, nor did it have the resources to be able to do it. Now we can fly all over the place, we can communicate with each other. Now we're at a stage where uniting of all of humanity is a possibility, and God has sent a messenger and a message to get that job done. And it's not that humanity is going to do it, but it's part of God's plan. He's given us the opportunity now. Now we have to just implement it and see it through.
Where do you have the largest communities?
In terms of Belize or the world?
In Belize. In Belize.
But I think that would be Belmopan,
San Ignacio.
San Ignacio, and maybe Belize City.
Okay. And tell us a bit about the spiritual assembly, the celebration that you had coordinated.
Okay, it was all a rush.
I'm sure you didn't forget the date.
But like I said before, in the Bahai Faith, we like a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a garden, if you just have red roses, it's beautiful. But if you mix in some yellow, some white, some purple, and this or what, you have a more beautiful garden. And so some of the activities included, we had a young man from Dangriga. He came in, we did some drummings. We had a beautiful black light dance. So it's all black lights, and you have glowing. We had presentations by children. We had prayers, of course, we had writings, and we also had a video to showcase a bit of the history of the Bahai Faith.
Yeah. So it was just a celebration.
A celebration.
Yes, because
everybody
it's
coming together.
200 years since the birth of Baha'u'llah, so it's
Yeah.
like a significant time in the history of the Baha'i faith, and not just in Belize, all over the world, based on their timeline.
Yeah.
Communities were having similar celebrations, some bigger, some smaller, based on their capacity, of course. So it was not just in Belize, all over the world we were celebrating this special occasion.
But I mean, I think part of it also was that almost everything that was done during the celebration focused on a vision of unity and that type of thing. So all the artistic expressions express that ideal in one way or the other.
Now, what has been the level of interest for new persons wanting to join the faith?
In the Bahai Faith, or in Belize, here people are accustomed to having a central clergy in a religion. Somebody,
A priest, a pastor, a bishop.
Right.
Yeah.
and he's going to present the sermons, and he's going to teach. In the Bahai Faith, it works a bit different. There's no clergy. There's no central pulpit. Nobody goes and really per se preach. We sit in circles, and everybody's voice is equal, and it's, as Laurel said, it's independent investigation of truth. It's not like you're not going to sit and listen to somebody tell you what to believe. You're going to read and look out for yourself and see if whatever message is coming to you is appropriate for this time and age. Maybe if it interacts well with science, if it addresses some of the social ills that we're having. And so I wouldn't say being a Baha'i is not as easy as going to church. It's about really doing.
You have to do the work. Like you have to read if you're going to come and be a part of the, I guess you call it celebration.
To the extent that you can be a Baha'i with not being a Baha'i because of your level of service to the community and your level of love to humanity. And you can be a Baha'i, call yourself a Baha'i for 50 years, but if you do not act on it, you do not serve humanity, you do not love humanity, you do not do things for the betterment of humanity, then all might be in vain. Ultimately, God judges us, but
But from what you know, so service, community service is integral to your faith.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the identifiable ideologies from the faith itself. So, as you pointed out, people are accustomed to a bishop, a priest, a pastor. Some people are used to a particular format within a church, or testimonials if they're part of Pentecostal community. What are some of the identifiable ideologies and traditions within your faith?
Well, as Bernard mentioned, the absence of a clergy is, I guess, significant. Baha'u'llah has left us the administrative order. It's kind of short time to explain the whole thing, but the idea behind it is, for example, like Bernard and I are a member of the National Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of Belize, which is the administrative body that we serve on to administer the faith in the country of Belize.
Okay.
That body is elected by Baha'is in the country of Belize based on how Baha'u'llah has outlined it should take place.
Yeah.
So that's the governing body, that administrative type thing.
Yeah.
Each local community, for example, Belize City has a local spiritual assembly elected by members of the Baha'is in Belize, and each district, where there are 9 or more Baha'is, it is their duty to have a local spiritual assembly, because that's prescribed in our faith. That's how, because even though we don't have a leader, so certain things need to be taken care of. So that's just
right, exactly.
Exactly.
Make sure the lights are on in your
Right. Paying the bills, right, exactly.
So aside from that, it's not a status, it's a service, because you are serving.
Yeah.
We have holiday celebrations like the one we just had, that are outlined in the faith. We have what we have in 19-day feast, which is every 19 days based on the Baha'i calendar, where it's a religious celebrations. We have prayer, we have song, we have music, we share some sort of food. So those are the things that are ingrained. The holidays, the 19-day feast are ingrained in the faith. Aside from that, our Baha'i communities, based on the dynamics of that community, have our children classes, which are geared towards young children. We have junior youth groups, which is the Junior Empowerment Program that Richard was talking about. And then we have institute courses. The purpose of institute courses is to empower people to serve, to have them find their path of service. Like we said, one of the big things of the Baha'i faith is, how are you going to serve? It's not just, I'm a Baha'i and then I relax. It's our duty to teach, to serve, and to also, like I said, promote the principles of the faith.
Yeah.
Aside from that, we have devotional meetings. Devotional meeting is like, we get together with prayer, we have fellowship. Anything else that I missed out?
No.
That's most of it. Okay. I mean, other than that, it's just flexible what the community wants to do.
And where is your central base? Where do you gather for prayer?
Well, one of the big things that we focus on is neighborhoods. Like, for example, I have activities in my home, in my neighborhood. We do have centers in several of the communities. We have our national center, which is in Belmopan. But Corozal, for example, have their center where they can have activities for the whole community. However, if Bernard, for example, decides he wants to, go out and invite his neighbor to prayer to his home, that's totally acceptable, because that is where they live, that is his community, that's people he has that one-on-one with. So devotion, anybody can have a devotional meeting.
Okay.
And where do you hope to see the faith in the next 10 years in Belize?
That's one thing in terms of the exact numbers. I think more than anything else, at least in my mind, what we'd like to see is the implementation of this program that we've got outlined right now. The whole idea is to help transform individuals in neighborhoods and hopefully larger societies. And then by implementing these children's classes, junior youth groups, devotionals, and the study, I think if we can get that process going well, then I think we can really see some big impacts in the community.
And just out of curiosity, what is, maybe from your experience, what was the hardest part of becoming a Baha'i? What was the most challenging part? Because I know, I mean, I grew up Catholic.
Maybe I can add to that.
Okay.
It's not because you're born in a Baha'i faith that means that you are compelled.
Yeah. Right.
For instance, there's no baptism, so when you're born, you're welcome, and that's so. When she mentioned it before, when you get to age 15, then you decide, okay, is this right for me? Does this fulfill my needs? Do I want to look farther? And that sort of stuff. It's not like, and myself, my family, my big family is the only Baha'is, and so for me growing up, it was difficult. But the principles of knowing that I'm part of a process or part of a religion that makes the world a better place, irresponsible of color, creed, religion, it has the potential to change the world. And also another thing dear to my heart was that religion needs to be in sync with science. You can't have religion, which is one great force, and science, which is another great force, fighting each other, because you might not get too far. But if you have two of these together, then it's good and good.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the fascinating things that I find about Baha'i faith. What is the root of this integration between, or balance between, religion and science?
Well, I think
Baha'u'llah was a scientist? Or?
No. I think it really goes back to this whole idea of independent investigation of truth. And that when you look for truth, we have two main forces for determining truth, religious and scientific. And truth is one. It's not like there's 5 different truths out there, and if you look through one lens, it's one thing, and another lens, it's another thing. Truth is one, so therefore, no matter which lens you're looking at it with, it should arrive pretty much to the same place.
It's the third side of the story.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's truth, and then there's religion, and all. If the triangle is working together, then everything should go in a pretty good direction.
So let me give you a scenario. This morning I was in traffic jam, right? And the truth is that you shouldn't overtake when there's so many cars on this side, right?
Tell us.
So that was the rule. But let's say I got into an accident. I got my hand broken or something like that. The truth is that you shouldn't overtake. But the ambulance comes, and I'm like, ambulance, don't overtake these vehicles because you can create another accident. And so truth is relative sometimes. It depends on from where you're looking at.
Right.
And that goes through society, that goes through all the ages and the world and our micro society here.
And an evolving society in
Right,
general.
exactly. It's changing all the time. But just one more thing that you asked about what's most difficult. I think one of the biggest challenges is a matter of standards that you have in your life, right? Because from a Baha'i perspective, we're not allowed to drink alcohol, there's no premarital sex, all these other type of things. So when you're interacting with people, sometimes you've got a standard that other people just don't understand. And so to integrate how you're going to lead your life when you have to lead it with a lot of other people that may not look at the world the same way you do, I think is sometimes one of the biggest challenges. So it's a matter of working that out. But it's doable. So.
And what is the most frequently asked question that you get?
What is a Bahai?
No.
Literally, like Bahai or
What do you believe in?
Where's your church? There's so many
your
questions.
church? Okay, tell me. I want to hear.
Like, where is your
See if you
church?
wanna ask them
There are a lot
these.
of questions that kind of you hear like where's your
Strange
church?
question.
Who is your leader?
Who's your leader? Okay.
That's sort of in Belize. That's a common question. Who's
No,
your
the
leader?
frequent one that I have is along the line of kind of what you were talking about in terms of the spread of the faith and all this other type of stuff, is what is the relationship between Baha'u'llah and Jesus Christ? And how does that all work out? And if you say Baha'u'llah is the next messenger, how can that be true when Jesus says certain things in the Bible as well? And so it's understanding that and working out that discussion, I think.
What could you
can
make
be-
me understand?
You believe in a God. So you believe in a God. You believe in Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
You believe that
In-
Baha'u'llah was a
another-
subsequent messenger
Yes.
following Jesus
Okay.
Christ,
Right.
who was born 200 years ago. So he's fairly
Yeah, right, exactly.
interesting.
And that they're all linked. That they're
With Buddhism, Hinduism,
Right.
and the other religions as well.
let me see.
What about respect of other faiths?
Well, actually, the person who actually taught me most of the faith, Miss Mary Williams, who is one of the senior members of her Baha'i faith in the country. She's very elderly right now. She has this way of describing it. She says it's like a mirror. And if we look up at the sun, you can't see it, it will hurt your eyes. But when you put the mirror, the light is reflected there, and now you can look at it. And progressive religion is similar, through the course of humanity. At some point we need somebody to tell us certain information, we're able to digest it. Likewise, a child in preschool, you learn your numbers, you learn your colors. When you go to primary school, you learn a little bit more, you go to high school. So as humanity develop and progress, so we learn more, and so is the messengers of God. As humanity develop more capacity, they were able to reveal us more. Hence why, like in the Baha'i faith, like we say, we have administrative bodies because there are certain administrative things to take place, but humanity has the ability to read the writings, to think for themselves. And and as Baha'is, we don't denounce any messenger of God because we embrace that it's all the same light that is continuing. The light doesn't stop, and God did promise that he would never leave us alone, and he's not left us alone, and it continues. So that is how Baha'i faith, we embrace all messengers of God.
Well, we thank you for being here this morning and sharing a bit about your faith. I feel like I was back in my theology course. But it's important to understand the different beliefs that people hold if we want to be able to live in a respectful society. So I appreciate you coming in. We appreciate you sharing all the information. And of course, you have a website and a Facebook page if anybody wants to learn more. Thank you once again.
Thank you for having
We
me.
have to go ahead and take our final break now. And when we come back, we'll have our wrap up. So stay tuned.